This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com. Of course, follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by costume designer Giovanni Lipari, whose work includes Halo, Into the Badlands, and Apple TV Plus's The Buccaneers, just to name a few. Welcome to the show, Giovanni.
Hi, thank you for having me today. Hi,
Um,
Gordon.
I guess my first question is when I talk to costume designers, I find that a lot of them, they all come from different sort of avenues. There's not one way into the industry. So how did you end up becoming a costume designer?
This is a very interesting question because that's the truth. For some reasons, we all end up by different paths, and when we end up working together before becoming designer, this is what sometimes you need to do to line up the knowledge of the job. You know, you might be an assistant, so someone has a different background. So you really start by being an assistant, if you did. Some people come from fashion, once again. So you start learning the process of the movie industry before TV. There's a specific process you should learn in order to, to achieve what then you need later on. And my personal one, it's possibly more boring than others. I went to the art school in Florence, Italy, and then I realized that I like production design and set design. And then by doing this, I learned costumes were gorgeous. So
Mhm.
I was never born with the thing of the fabric and the fashion, and I learned it along the way that it was a very interesting. It was a miniature of a set. So it was the correspondence of what you do on set, you do on costumes and characters. So I started this learning how sets and costumes talk to each other. And this is eventually what I would do when I do work. I really have a good chat with the production designer, which happened in this case in Buccaneers as well. We don't need to talk every week, but I need to know the direction this person's going. And if I get that, then it can really, it's a lead, it's a really good lead because these things is going to go against beautiful sets. And so what a Buccaneers was, it was gorgeous, environment for it to fit.
I've been a camera person for 30 years and I fell in love with cinema. I heard there was free film school in France and I wanted to get into the French film school. I really didn't know anything at the time, but I knew at least how to take pictures. So I said, I'll try for the image department. And then when I miraculously got into the French film school, I fell in love with working with the camera. You're following what's going to be in the movie. So that immediacy that the camera allows is what I loved from the beginning. I'm Kirsten Johnson, and this is my course about documentary cinematography.
Well, I was gonna say Buccaneers is like it almost seems like a dream project because it's not just like we're doing old-timey clothes. It's like
Correct,
everyone has a unique style. Everyone has
correct.
a very specific rule, approach. So like when you got onto Buccaneers, what was like, I guess let's start with like Christine Forsyth.
Mhm.
Like what was your approach for her character, Nancy George?
That was a lot of phone calls beforehand, which are the scary one
Yeah.
because you end up talking about concepts, and these conversations not necessarily end up making it easier than when you meet. So I would have a tendency to listen more what this cast member in this case, in order to become that character, what are the requirements in order of priority for this specific person.
Mhm.
But I always wait a little longer until we meet each other to then open up and showing clothes, because concepts you can talk about weeks and months. Then you
Mhm.
always need to go pick up something out of the rack or making a piece out of fabric, something, and then that needs to be worn. So there were like conversations in regards of what this character could be or would be, but this is once again a conversation between me and the person, but then there's like the whole variety of characters then to balance the other. So usually building a character is not building that one. It's in the context of the others, so sometimes you really it's like doing photography at lights. In order to make something popping, you need to just build a contrast, if that make any sense. But you cannot openly tell to a character. You're going to be more in contrast to where, you secretly need to just prepare it. And then they all become a scene once again, along with sets and everything. They all become something balancing all together, a beautiful symphony. That's the idea.
So how did how did the actors once you start meeting with them, how did they impact the looks of the characters?
They do a lot more that you would expect, and not for the bad or not for the good. So ideally, in no longer past, I'd say directors were the one, especially in the film industry, having a specific idea what the character should be, and it was pretty tough for cast members to say, "I'm not going to do this." Whether in television, things are very different, and the showrunner would normally be more open to feel the cast ideas. So the ideas are more built, for me, they're built on the script and the conversation I have really creative, and mostly happens to be this way. But I also need to listen to the person who comes a few days before the shooting, and then if this person has specific body requirements, to adjust, to make sure, you're always trying to help them to feel more comfortable at the beginning, and then you can slowly move towards what you think it should be more later on. So sometimes there are compromises for the first scenes, and those first scenes are the ones you shoot first. It doesn't mean it's a scene number one. So you might have some compromised design in the middle of the set, in the middle of the shooting, or in the middle of the episodes, and that helps the character to comes in. So some cast member are there a month before and they have time to adjust. The ones arriving the day before, if they have a bit of time, they'll adjust along the way. So what you end up putting on the screen is pretty much what you want that to be, with the agreement of the creative person, which is the showrunner normally, or director. But the cast member can influence based on how many fears they normally would carry in. Normally they relax later on, but they do have a say.
Well, it's interesting because you talk about the comfort of the actor, and my first question, literally as soon as I started watching the show, was, did you alter the costumes for the women? Because they're all wearing essentially corsets and like tight clothes, but that wouldn't be too comfortable for the actors, but it also has to like look authentic to a certain degree. So, were you able to make alterations to those, and how did you do that to make it comfortable for them?
I really like any question you're putting here. They're very smart, direct, to the point. So I would ultimately suggest, based on what the history is. So on top of what the designer, can be me or whoever, says, we have history books. So we can flip through and see what the proportion were. Now, obviously, this is not really a pushing into the period, although this is a period piece. If someone really wants to walk away from that, it would be the only person who's different than the others. So at the end of the story, there's not really me against someone, or we can walk together down a different path, but that would be pretty visible. Ultimately, I'd say if you really want to be something different and then someone is okay with that, then you'll look out of the context. And unless it's scripted this way, then it would be something you might regret later on. So it's not really me wanting to design that for you. It's like we can design it together, the fabric, but the shape is something existing since. So we should obey to it. Obviously, adjustment to the body, yes, because the corsets, it's painful, isn't it? So when I talk to them, especially the girls, also guys, has a lot of restrictions, right? And they don't like it either. So I would ask if they'd done that before. And if they did, then it's the whole different stories. They know what they expect. Whether the person are brand new into it, so we slowly get there. And so we make those corsets we leave it more open. And then during this shooting, they go closer and closer on the back. It's the back when they're all laced. and you'll see there's like it's like they went during the pandemic.
Mhm.
No, some people were okay with masks even if they didn't like it, and some people did not even want to. They went crazy over the masks of their face. And the same as the course as the restrictions that some one take put up with, and some other has a big issue then. And then we walk along. But if it's too tight around here, so we make alterations, hidden alterations that do not change a lot the exterior, the outcome of the shape. But sometimes they're visible to me. But I
Mhm.
understand that helps them not to go back home at night with marks on their body, although they have marks on their body.
Yeah.
They do.
Well, I guess I'm like broken ribs or something like
Uh,
crazy.
well, well, actually, it protects your ribs for
Oh
anything
yeah.
because it's like a proper,
Yeah.
corset. So it's, it protects you from a lot of things from the outside. But the inside is squeezed, and
Yeah.
but they start liking it along the way. You'll see on set. I have phone calls from, customers or people that work on set, girls, and say, "Hey, Giovanni, we need to make this corset tighter." Whether at the fitting 3 months before, it was like, no, I'm never going to be able to. So they start seeing themselves receiving compliments and say, ultimately, it's not that bad, isn't it?
One
So
of
you win eventually, but
yeah.
eventually.
One of the things I found really interesting was the dichotomy or the difference between the US and England. So like when you get into England, it's almost like it's really colorful and exciting in the US, the color
Yes,
choices, and then in England it's almost muted and sad.
yes.
So what were the discussions with the director and the creatives to sort of figure out these looks, and where did your input come in? Where did the directors come in? That type of thing.
Well, obviously, the director,
Yeah.
Susanna, who is the person I listen beforehand. So all the inputs come from that.
Mhm.
If you cook bread or you bake something sweet, it's the really different direction. You still use the oven, right?
Mhm.
So meaning that the director make the big choice on what are we doing with a period piece. Um, Ultimately, at this stage, I bravely asked if it was okay to move these Buccaneers 1870 scripted to 1880 style-wise, because 10 years later, understanding period pieces as to be historically correct, at the same time, the ladies and gentlemen need to look appealable, understandable now. Whether the 70s are, the girls are covered in fabric and huge, humongous headpieces, that would have been very difficult to modernize, to to make it a nice looking
Mhm.
obeying to the style at the time. So the 80s, they started new thing. The body of the ladies comes more forward. You see more the shape of the body. There's a lot less volume everywhere. They agreed with that. So for the first time, even before listening, I asked if there was any way they could have considered moving 10 years forward style-wise. Then I listened the direction and the freshness. They wanted the big fresh money, the new American US money. We call it
Mhm.
fresh, meaning the fragrance of
Yeah.
something like brand new that was visible. And so as soon as we established that the shapes of the period were going to stay faithful to it, I begged them to not change things on shapes because they're made to look good at the time. So I started making a color palette with all the ranges of what would be. So before even looking into the shape of the costumes, we talk about colors. And that's why more than, like the watercolors from UK was like, it's the depth of the color. The palette can actually change along the way, along the show. But the beginning of it, it's make a summer and make a new, the depth of the color is in the history of in UK.
Mhm.
UK has a history, so it has depth. Where the US at the time had a different history and a different depth. That's why we have a watercolor. The watercolor is a veil, like something very thin, and you can still see the canvas or the paper under. So that was the America. Something beautiful, accomplished, but you can still see the texture of the canvas where the paint happened. Whether on England we have oil painting,
Mhm.
you don't know what the base of that canvas anymore because it's been years and hundreds of years of successful history. And that was the depth of the color. That's why we made it like more fall,
Mhm.
at the end of the summer, like a more fall, wintry palette, whether the American, as you see, it was mint and orange and all this light thing. And the combination of these two together, when we get to England, you'll see Honoria, which is that lady, then start crossing the two worlds. She was English, she is English, but she looked at the other girls, and she's the one crossing the two worlds, start making small differences to then she feel attracted from the young girls. And that's one of the character we pointed on, making feel the differences.
Interesting. One of the things I also would love to know, because I think about the fabric of like any wedding dress I've been around or something, it makes
Yes.
a lot of noise when they
Oh
walk.
yeah.
So, but in film, we have to record the audio, and it's really important to get perfect audio on set if we can. So, how did you work with the material to make sure that it was quiet or as quiet as possible?
Well, it's physics. So I'm not trained to change that. I mean, I wasn't working at alchemist. I didn't put something, I didn't make ceramic into gold. So I keep saying there's not much, unless we do this job in, I don't know, in all in wool. So with the 1880 in wool, that'd be lovely. But then the result of it is wool. Doesn't make change, but noise. So the noise is an issue, stays an issue. Sometimes, most of the times, not sometimes, we'll make sure the radio mic, whatever the radio mic goes through, is always there's a layer of something, and within layers, there's always something that makes the least of the noise. But fabrics makes noise. Of course, silk, it's terrifying, isn't it? It's their thing, but most of the time we'll make sure that whatever the radio mic records, there's the least possible of noisy material, even though they're not really happy. If you think about Halo, just for a second, Halo was an armor made of so many plasticky, rubbery material. So there's a little there's a lot of technical details we can look after, but that does not cancel noise. Noise is going to be there
no
pretty annoyingly for them, and in their headset.
So I have to know, what is your favorite costume that you got to design for the show?
This is a question I ask myself pretty much all the time, each show. And it is almost like it is different all the time. And normally is I'd say, either the most difficult for me or the one who takes longer to come out of these, the thoughts. So once that one normally is the one I look back with more enthusiasm, because it's been like with me long, and it's not easy sometimes to you don't really have. You can't produce that. I mean, the schedule wants you to produce that much. We don't really have those ideas in 9 months time or a year time and 6 months. There are days and times you can actually tell then you like less your work because you were less mature to make choices. Those that happens all the time. But back to what I like the most in this case, and Nun was not the easiest character. For a number of reasons. Obviously, she was not meant to be a girl, sexy, beautiful, and it's really hard not making her beautiful. You need to take down a lot. Anything you put on her in fitting, it will look a lot more than she meant to be. She was meant to be a sort of a tomboy-ish character. She's not really looking into men, or she doesn't want to attract them. She doesn't hate them either. She's very neutral, but she's not. She's a gorgeous, beautiful lady. And then anything you put on her, we would have gone. So every time I made a choice, I had to just take it down and lower. So that's why we learned how to use these, all these jackets she uses are originally copied, made out of an original, beautiful thing I found from 1890s and adapted to the 80s, changing things. And we made a lot of those ones. And, avoiding showing cleavage and all these things, we said with the director, we're using a biker coat for her. So that was something then it was achieved pretty quickly. And I already thought that was going to take a lot longer. So all of a sudden it became my favorite because it was the most difficult one.
Interesting. So I have one last question for you.
Please.
what is a TV show or a movie that you really like and turn to?
Boardwalk Empire. Actually, I
Boardwalk
remember
Empire.
now.
Yes, yeah. What is it about that you liked?
Well, I liked that there is a lot of movies feel into a TV, and
Hmm.
it's really you really feel that 20 you feel in the 20s. You really feel you really have the feeling of uh, this part and the way it's written. I have I'm particularly interested and attracted by the how the the history pieces are made.
Yeah.
And this one, it doesn't want to be a TV show. This one, it wants to be filthy as a movie could be. So he's brave enough to, I can say it's brave, has been brave over any TV show wants to be. Didn't care about it's not a polished.
Yeah.
It
Interesting.
has the grain of a movie.
Yeah.
It has
Very
like a
interesting.
texture of a movie, a feel of it, a scent of it. That's what I like about when they're brave enough not to make you stay as a. I don't feel a viewer anymore there. Whether
Hmm.
in many TV show, I personally feel a viewer, and then
Interesting.
I forget about it.
That's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com and of course on Instagram at filmmaker_you. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching. This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs.